In the winter of 2006, just outside Gettysburg, paramedic Daniel Harper rented a small white farmhouse at the end of Black Hollow Road, a property that had sat half forgotten behind a curtain of bare trees and sagging fences for nearly 30 years. The landlord barely asked questions, the rent was suspiciously low, and the neighbors, what few there were, avoided eye contact when he mentioned the address. But Daniel, exhausted from long night shifts and desperate for quiet, signed the lease anyway. He had grown up believing every mystery had a medical, psychological, or environmental explanation, so when locals muttered about the widow who once lived there and the husband who vanished during a snowstorm in 1972, he dismissed it as small-town folklore amplified by boredom. The first week passed uneasily but quietly, aside from a persistent smell of damp earth that seemed strongest in the hallway outside his bedroom, like soil freshly turned after rain, though the ground outside was frozen solid. On the 8th night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., he woke to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps pacing above him in the attic. 3 steps forward, pause, 3 steps back, pause, repeating with mechanical precision. He checked the attic the next morning and found nothing but dust, old insulation, and a narrow wooden trunk tucked behind a beam, too heavy to move alone. He told himself raccoons could have slipped in through a vent, yet there were no droppings, no claw marks, no signs of life. The following night, after returning from a grueling shift responding to a fatal car accident on Route 15, Daniel collapsed into bed and slept heavily until a soft knock pulled him awake. It came from his bedroom door. 3 slow taps. Before he could speak, a woman's voice whispered from the other side, "Daniel." The whisper wasn't loud, it was intimate, as though spoken inches from his ear. His heart hammered because he had introduced himself to neighbors only as Dan, and no one else knew he was home that late. He grabbed a flashlight, opened the door, and found the hallway empty, but muddy footprints, fresh, dark, unmistakable, led from the attic stairs straight to the foot of his bed, and stopped as if whoever made them had simply vanished. The temperature in the house felt 10 degrees colder, his breath visible in the beam of the flashlight, despite the heater running. The next day, unsettled but determined to prove a rational cause, Daniel forced open the attic trunk and found brittle newspaper clippings detailing the disappearance of the widow's husband, Thomas Hale, along with dozens of handwritten notes describing a tall figure standing silently at the foot of the widow's bed every night at 3:17 a.m., whispering, "I'm still waiting." Beneath the clippings lay a small cassette recorder. When Daniel replaced the batteries and pressed play, a trembling voice, clearly the widow's, filled the attic. "He says he's cold. He says the ground is heavy. He says I left him there." The tape ended with 3 distinct knocks. That night, Daniel set up a video camera aimed at his bed and left the attic hatch open, hoping to catch proof of trespassers or structural noises, anything explainable. At 3:17 a.m., the power abruptly failed. The house plunged into darkness so complete it felt suffocating. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, paralyzed by an overwhelming pressure on his chest. In the blackness, he heard slow footsteps descending the attic stairs, each step groaning under invisible weight, then stopping beside his bed. A presence loomed over him, radiating cold so intense it burned his skin, and though he could not turn his head, he sensed a face inches from his own, head tilted at an unnatural angle. A low male voice whispered, not in anger, but in weary accusation, "She left me in the ground." When the lights flickered back on at 3:18 a.m., the room was empty, yet the smell of soil was overpowering, and his bedsheets were smeared with mud. The camera battery, fully charged hours earlier, was drained, but one corrupted frame remained, a gaunt, shadowy figure bending over him, features distorted, mouth open in what might have been a silent scream. Shaken beyond denial, Daniel decided to move out immediately. But as he packed his truck that afternoon, he noticed a rectangular patch of earth near the tree line behind the house that had sunk slightly, snow melting faster there than anywhere else. Compelled by equal parts fear and duty, because he was, after all, a paramedic sworn to help the living and respect the dead, he began to dig. 2 feet down, his shovel struck rotted wood. Authorities later uncovered a crude coffin containing human remains consistent with a decades-old burial. Dental records confirmed it was Thomas Hale, officially missing since 1972, likely killed during a domestic dispute never reported. The case was quietly reopened and quietly closed, the widow having died years earlier in a nursing home, her repeated 911 calls dismissed at the time as dementia. Daniel left Gettysburg the very next morning, refusing to spend another night in the farmhouse, yet he has never been entirely free of it. Even now, years later, in a different state, in a modern apartment miles from any fields or forests, he wakes at exactly 3:17 a.m. several times a month, to the faint but unmistakable smell of damp earth. Sometimes he hears 3 slow knocks on his bedroom door, and once, just once, he opened his eyes in the dark and saw a tall shape standing at the foot of his bed, head tilted, as if patiently waiting for someone to confess.